The rain came down in sheets that Tuesday night, turning the construction site into a maze of mud and shadows. Marcus Reed sat in his truck at 11:47 p.m., the engine idling, the heater fighting a losing battle against the cold that seeped through every crack in the old Ford's frame. His hands were wrapped around a thermos of coffee that had gone lukewarm an hour ago, and his eyes kept drifting to the passenger seat, where his daughter Emma's school photo was taped to the dashboard. She was 8 years old in that picture, gap-toothed and grinning, her dark hair pulled back in the messy ponytail he never quite managed to get right. He had promised her he would be home by midnight, promised they would watch a movie together before she fell asleep, even though she had school in the morning and he had another shift starting at 6 a.m. But the foreman had called at the last minute asking if he could stay late to secure the site before the storm hit. And Marcus had said yes, because he always said yes, because the overtime meant Emma could have new shoes instead of the ones with the sole coming loose, because saying no felt like a luxury he could not afford. The construction site sat on the edge of downtown Chicago, a half-finished office building that would someday house tech startups and coffee shops with names like Brew Awakening. But tonight it was just steel beams and concrete floors and tarps that snapped in the wind like gunshots. Marcus had spent the last hour checking that everything was tied down, that the equipment was locked away, that nothing would blow loose and hurt someone when the storm really hit. Now he was just waiting for the rain to ease up enough that he could see the road clearly. Just a few more minutes and he would head home. That was when he saw her. At first he thought it was a trick of the light, a shadow moving between the construction barriers. But then lightning flashed, bright and brief, and he saw her clearly. A woman stumbling through the mud, her clothes soaked through, her movements uncoordinated and wrong. She took 3 more steps toward his truck, then her knees buckled and she collapsed against the driver's side door with a thud that he felt more than heard. Marcus was out of the truck before his brain fully caught up with what he was seeing. The rain hit him like a physical thing, cold and brutal, soaking through his work jacket in seconds. He reached the woman and knelt beside her, his hands hovering uncertainly. She was dressed in clothes that did not belong in a construction site at midnight. A tailored blazer, now mud-stained and torn at the shoulder, dress pants that probably cost more than his monthly rent, heels that had been expensive once, though one was missing now, lost somewhere in the mud. Her face was pale, almost gray in the dim light from his truck's headlights. Her dark hair clung to her cheeks and neck, and when he touched her shoulder gently trying to rouse her, her skin was cold. Too cold. His training kicked in then, the muscle memory from years he had tried to forget. He checked her pulse, his fingers pressed to her neck, and felt the flutter of it, weak but present. Her breathing was shallow, rapid, her chest rising and falling in a rhythm that screamed distress. "Ma'am," he said, his voice cutting through the rain, "can you hear me? I need you to open your eyes." She did not respond. Her head lolled to the side, and that was when he saw it, the tattoo. It was on her left shoulder, revealed where the blazer had torn away and the shirt beneath had pulled down. A design he had not seen in 12 years, but one he would recognize anywhere. A phoenix, wings spread wide, rising from flames that curled around the edges. But it was not just any phoenix. This one was unique, specific. The flames formed letters if you looked closely enough, letters that spelled a name, Sophia. Marcus's hands began to shake, not from the cold, not from the rain, but from something deeper, something that clawed its way up from the part of his past he had buried and sworn never to touch again. He stared at the tattoo, his breath catching in his throat, his mind racing through impossible calculations. It could not be her. Sophia was dead. He had watched her die 12 years ago on a rain-slicked highway, her car wrapped around a telephone pole, her body broken in ways that still haunted his dreams. He had been the first responder that night, fresh out of EMT training, 23 years old, and convinced he could save everyone. He had knelt beside her in the wreckage, had held her hand while they waited for the jaws of life, had listened to her whisper things he could barely hear over the sound of his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. She had told him about the tattoo, told him she had gotten it a week before the accident, that it was supposed to represent her sister who had died in a fire when they were children. She had told him her sister's name was Sophia, and that she wanted to carry her memory on her skin, always. And then she had stopped talking, and Marcus had felt her pulse fade beneath his fingers, and he had screamed for the paramedics to do something, anything, but it had been too late. He had quit being an EMT 6 months later. The weight of all the people he could not save had crushed him, and Sophia had been the one that broke him. He had never learned her real name, had never been able to bring himself to look at the accident report. He had just walked away from the job, from the uniform, from the part of himself that believed he could make a difference. And now, 12 years later, here was that same tattoo on a woman collapsed in the mud outside his truck. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. Marcus forced himself to focus. Whoever this woman was, whatever impossible connection she had to his past, she was dying right now if he did not do something. He scooped her up, cradling her against his chest, and carried her to the passenger side of his truck. She was lighter than he expected, her body limp and unresponsive. He laid her across the bench seat, angling her so her head was elevated, and grabbed his phone. He needed to call 911, but when he pulled out his phone, the screen showed no signal. The storm had knocked out the cell towers, or maybe they were just too far from civilization for it to matter. He cursed under his breath and looked at the woman again. Her lips were turning blue, and her breathing was getting shallower. He did not have time to wait for help to find them. He had to get her to a hospital himself. He climbed into the driver's seat and threw the truck into gear. The tires spun in the mud for a terrifying moment before finding purchase, and then they were moving, jolting over uneven ground toward the main road. Marcus kept one hand on the wheel and the other on the woman's wrist, monitoring her pulse. It was fading, slipping away like water through his fingers, and he pressed down harder on the gas pedal. The nearest hospital was 20 minutes away in good weather. In this storm, with the roads flooding and visibility near zero, it could be twice that. Marcus did not know if she had that much time. He glanced at her again, at the tattoo on her shoulder, and felt the memories surge up like a wave trying to drown him. Sophia's face, pale and bloodied, her hand in his squeezing weakly, her voice barely a whisper, asking him to tell someone she was sorry. He had never known who she wanted him to tell, had never had the chance to ask. "Stay with me," he said to the woman beside him, his voice rough. "You don't get to die in my truck, not tonight, not like this." She did not respond, but her eyelids fluttered just for a second, and he took that as a sign to keep going. The drive to the hospital felt like it lasted hours, though his dashboard clock told him it was only 18 minutes. He ran 2 red lights and nearly hydroplaned into a guardrail, but he got her there. He pulled up to the emergency entrance, laid on the horn, and within seconds 2 nurses and a doctor were rushing out with a gurney. They took her from him, asking rapid-fire questions he barely registered. Who was she? What had happened? Was she on any medications? He told them everything he knew, which was almost nothing. Found her collapsed at a construction site, no ID, unconscious, pulse weak, breathing shallow, possible hypothermia. And then he mentioned the tattoo because it felt important, because it felt like the only clue to who she might be. The doctor nodded, made a note on a clipboard, and then they were wheeling her through the automatic doors, and Marcus was left standing in the rain, his hands still shaking, his mind a tangled mess of past and present. He should leave. He should go home to Emma, who was probably still awake, waiting for him. But his feet would not move. He stood there, staring at the doors the woman had disappeared through, and he felt something he had not felt in 12 years. The desperate, clawing need to know if he had saved her, if this time he had been enough. Finally, he walked inside. The waiting room was half empty, just a few people scattered across the plastic chairs, their faces drawn with exhaustion or worry. Marcus approached the front desk where a woman with tired eyes looked up at him expectantly. "The woman I just brought in," he said. "Is she going to be okay?" The woman's expression softened slightly. "Are you family?" "No, I just found her. I need to know if she's going to make it." The woman hesitated, then said, "I can't give you medical information unless you're family. But if you want to leave your contact information, I can have someone reach out if there's any change." Marcus nodded, though frustration coiled in his chest. He scribbled his name and number on the form she pushed across the desk, then turned to leave. But before he reached the door, a voice stopped him. "Excuse me, are you Marcus Reed?" He turned. A woman in scrubs was standing in the doorway that led to the treatment rooms, a tablet in her hands. She looked exhausted, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, but her eyes were sharp. "Yeah," Marcus said. "That's me." "The patient you brought in," the woman said. "She's stable now. We got her warmed up, got fluids in her, and she's responding. You got her here just in time. Another 10 minutes and we might have lost her." Relief washed over Marcus so completely that his knees nearly buckled. "Thank you," he managed. "That's good. That's really good." The woman nodded, then glanced down at her tablet. "We're trying to identify her. She didn't have any ID on her, and she hasn't been conscious enough to tell us her name. But we found something interesting." Marcus's pulse quickened. "What?" "She has a medical alert bracelet. It was hidden under her sleeve, but one of the nurses noticed it. It has a name and an emergency contact number." The woman looked up at him. "The name on the bracelet is Victoria Ashford." The name meant nothing to Marcus, but it was a name, and names could be traced. "Did you call the emergency contact?" "We did. They're on their way." The woman paused, studying him. "You did a good thing tonight. A lot of people would have just called 911 and waited. You saved her life." Marcus did not feel like a hero. He felt like a man who had stumbled into something he did not understand, something that connected to a past he had spent 12 years trying to escape. But he nodded anyway, mumbled another thank you, and walked out into the rain. He sat in his truck for a long time before starting the engine. His hands were still shaking, and his mind kept circling back to that tattoo. Victoria Ashford. The name did, not match the woman from 12 years ago, but that did not mean anything. People changed their names. People had daughters. People had sisters. He pulled out his phone and typed the name into a search engine. The results loaded slowly, the signal weak in the storm, but eventually a page appeared. Victoria Ashford, CEO of Ashford Technologies, a company that specialized in medical devices and artificial intelligence. Net worth estimated at $1.2 billion. Age 36. No mention of family, no mention of a sister named Sophia. Marcus stared at the screen, at the professional headshot of a woman with sharp features and colder eyes than the ones he had seen tonight. This was the woman he had pulled from the mud. A billionaire, a CEO, someone who lived in a world so far removed from his that they might as well have been on different planets. And yet she had that tattoo. The same tattoo, the same name. He did not know what it meant, did not know if it was coincidence or fate or something else entirely. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He could not walk away from this. Not yet. He started the truck and drove home. his mind already churning with questions he did not know how to answer. Emma was asleep on the couch when he walked in, the TV still on, playing the end credits of some animated movie. She was curled up under the blanket he had bought her for her birthday, her stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest. Marcus stood in the doorway for a moment, just watching her breathe, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on him. He had built this life carefully. After he quit being an EMT, he had taken the first job he could find, construction work, hard labor that left him too exhausted to think, too tired to dream. He had met Emma's mother, Claire, at a diner where she worked nights. They had dated for 6 months before she got pregnant, and they had tried to make it work. But Claire had wanted more than Marcus could give. She had wanted someone who was not haunted, someone who could smile without it looking like an effort. And when Emma was 2, Claire had left, moving across the country to start over with someone new. Marcus had not fought her. He had signed the papers, accepted full custody, and thrown himself into being the father Emma deserved. He worked long hours, saved every penny, and made sure she had everything she needed. He went to parent-teacher conferences and school plays. He learned how to braid hair from YouTube videos and how to cook macaroni and cheese that did not come from a box. He was not perfect, but he showed up every single day, and that had to count for something. But tonight, standing in the doorway and watching his daughter sleep, he felt the cracks in the foundation he had built. The past was supposed to stay buried. The woman on that highway was supposed to stay dead. And yet here was that tattoo, rising from the mud like a ghost, demanding to be seen. He walked over to the couch, gently lifted Emma into his arms and carried her to her bedroom. She stirred slightly, mumbling something he could not make out, and then settled back into sleep. He tucked her in, kissed her forehead, and stood there for a moment, memorizing the way she looked. Peaceful, safe, innocent. Whatever came next, whatever this thing with Victoria Ashford turned out to be, he would not let it touch her. He would not let his past become her burden. He went to his own room, peeled off his wet clothes, and lay down on the bed without bothering to turn on the light. Sleep did not come easily. His mind kept replaying the moment he had seen that tattoo, the way his hands had started to shake, the way his breath had caught in his throat. He kept hearing Sophia's voice, weak and fading, whispering words he had never been able to decipher. And he kept thinking about Victoria Ashford lying in a hospital bed, unconscious and vulnerable. A woman who had everything the world said mattered: money, power, success. And yet she had ended up in the mud, alone and dying, with no one to save her except a stranger who happened to be in the right place at the right time. Or maybe it was not chance at all. Maybe there were no coincidences, only patterns you could not see until you were standing in the middle of them. Marcus closed his eyes and tried to sleep, but all he could see was that tattoo, wings spread wide, rising from flames that spelled a name he could never forget. Marcus woke to the sound of Emma singing in the kitchen. It was a Saturday morning, which meant pancakes, her favorite, and the luxury of not having to rush through breakfast before school. He lay in bed for a moment, listening to her off-key rendition of some pop song he vaguely recognized from the radio, and tried to convince himself that last night had been a dream. The rain, the woman in the mud, the tattoo. But his work clothes were still damp in a pile by the door, and his phone showed 3 missed calls from an unknown number. Reality, then, not a dream. He dragged himself out of bed, pulled on sweatpants and a t-shirt, and padded into the kitchen. Emma was standing on the step stool he had built for her, attempting to flip a pancake with more enthusiasm than skill. The result was a misshapen blob that landed half on the spatula and half on the stovetop, but she beamed at him anyway. "Morning, Dad. I made breakfast." "I can see that," Marcus said, wrapping her in a hug from behind. "You're getting good at this." "Liar," she said cheerfully, but she leaned into him anyway, her small body warm and solid against his chest. "You were out late last night. Did you fall asleep on the couch again?" Something like that. He did not want to lie to her, but he also did not know how to explain what had happened. "How did you tell an 8-year-old that you had found a stranger dying in the mud, that she had a tattoo that connected to your worst memory, that you could not stop thinking about it?" They ate breakfast. Together at their tiny kitchen table, Emma chattering about school and her best friend Mia and the upcoming field trip to the Science Museum. Marcus listened, nodded in the right places, and tried to focus on her words, instead of the questions churning in his mind. But his attention kept drifting to his phone, to those missed calls, to the name he had typed into a search engine at midnight. Victoria Ashford. After breakfast, he sent Emma to her room to get dressed, then retreated to the couch with his laptop. He told himself he was just curious, that it did not mean anything, that he would look for 5 minutes and then move on with his day. But as he started searching, 5 minutes turned into 20, then 40, then an hour. Victoria Ashford was everywhere online. Articles in Forbes and Business Insider, TED Talks about innovation in medical technology, profiles in magazines that called her a visionary and a disruptor. She had founded Ashford Technologies 15 years ago, fresh out of MIT with a PhD in biomedical engineering. The company specialized in prosthetics and assistive devices, using artificial intelligence to create limbs that responded to neural signals with unprecedented precision. They had helped thousands of amputees regain mobility, had won awards for accessibility design, had partnerships with hospitals across the country. By all accounts, Victoria Ashford was brilliant, driven, successful beyond most people's wildest dreams. And according to the articles, she was also utterly alone. There were no mentions of family, no spouse, no children, no parents or siblings who showed up in photographs. The few personal details Marcus could find painted a picture of someone who lived for her work and nothing else. She reportedly kept a cot in her office and slept there more nights than she went home. She had been known to cancel meetings, to spend 72 hours straight in the lab when inspiration struck. Her employees described her as demanding but fair, brilliant but distant. One article quoted a former colleague saying, "Victoria doesn't do small talk. She doesn't do lunch breaks. She barely does sleep. I'm not sure she remembers how to be a person outside of work." Marcus stared at her photograph on the screen, a professional headshot where she wore a tailored suit and a smile that did not reach her eyes. This was the woman he had pulled from the mud, the woman with the tattoo, the woman who, despite everything she had accomplished, had ended up alone and unconscious in a construction site at midnight. What had she been doing there? How had she ended up so far from her world of tech startups and billion-dollar valuations? His phone buzzed. Another call from the same unknown number. This time, he answered. "Hello? Mr. Reed?" The voice on the other end was professional, clipped. "This is Dr. Angela Martinez from Chicago General. You brought in a patient last night, Victoria Ashford. I'm calling to let you know she's awake and asking to speak with you." Marcus's grip tightened on the phone. "She's awake?" "Yes. She regained consciousness about an hour ago. She's still weak, but she's coherent, and she specifically requested to see the person who brought her in. Would you be able to come to the hospital this morning?" Marcus looked at Emma's closed bedroom door, heard her singing to herself as she got dressed. He had promised to take her to the park today, to push her on the swings and watch her climb the monkey bars. But this, whatever this was, felt urgent in a way he could not ignore. "I'll be there in an hour," he said. The hospital looked different in daylight. less frantic, less desperate. Marcus walked through the automatic doors with Emma's hand clasped in his, her backpack slung over her shoulder. He had called his neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who had agreed to watch Emma for a few hours. The plan was to drop her off, go see Victoria Ashford, and be back in time for their park trip. Simple, straightforward. Except nothing about this felt simple. Dr. Martinez met him in the lobby, her expression warm but curious. "Mr. Reed, thank you for coming. And who's this?" "My daughter, Emma. I'm dropping her off at a friend's house nearby." That was not quite true. Mrs. Chen lived in their building, not nearby, but it felt like the kind of thing you said to doctors. "Well, it's nice to meet you, Emma." Dr. Martinez crouched down to Emma's level, smiling. "Your dad's a hero, you know. He saved someone's life last night." Emma looked up at Marcus with wide eyes. "You did?" "I just happened to be in the right place," Marcus said, uncomfortable with the label. "Anyone would have done the same." "Not anyone," Dr. Martinez said, standing. "Most people would have called 911 and waited. You acted. That made all the difference." She gestured toward the elevators. "Ms. Ashford is in room 412. She's still recovering, so please keep the visit brief. But she's been insistent about thanking you in person." Marcus nodded, then looked down at Emma. "I'm going to take you to Mrs. Chen's, and then I'll be back to get you in a little bit, okay?" "Can I come with you?" Emma asked, her voice hopeful. "I want to meet the person you saved." Marcus hesitated. Bringing his daughter to meet a billionaire CEO felt wrong somehow, like crossing a line between worlds that should not touch. But Emma was looking at him with those big, earnest eyes, and he found himself nodding before he could think it through. "Just for a minute," he said, "and you have to be very quiet. She's still sick." Emma nodded solemnly, and they took the elevator to the 4th floor. Room 412 was at the end of a long hallway, its door slightly ajar. Marcus knocked softly, and a voice from inside said, "Come in." Victoria Ashford was sitting up in bed, an IV line running into her arm, a blood pressure cuff wrapped around her bicep. She looked pale and exhausted, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, hospital issue. Blankets pooled around her waist, but her eyes were sharp, alert, and they locked onto Marcus the moment he stepped through the door. "You," she said. Her voice was hoarse, but there was strength beneath it. "You're the one who found me." "Yes, ma'am." Marcus stood awkwardly near the door, suddenly aware of how out of place he felt. His jeans were worn, his jacket frayed at the cuffs, and he probably smelled like construction dust and sweat. Emma clung to his side, peeking around his leg at the woman in the bed. Victoria's gaze shifted to Emma, and something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, or something softer. "And you brought your daughter." "I'm sorry," Marcus said quickly. "I was going to drop her off with a neighbor, but she wanted to come. We won't stay long." "No." Victoria shook her head, wincing slightly at the movement. "It's fine. I'm glad you're here. Both of you." She paused, studying Marcus with an intensity that made him want to look away. "Dr. Martinez told me you drove me here yourself, that the cell towers were down and you didn't wait for an ambulance." "I didn't think you had time to wait," Marcus said. "I didn't." Victoria's voice was quiet now, almost vulnerable. "She said another 10 minutes and I would have died, so thank you. I owe you my life, Mr. She paused, realizing she did not know his name. "Reed. Marcus Reed. And this is Emma." "Hi," Emma said shyly, waving. Victoria's lips curved into something that might have been a smile, though it looked rusty, like she did not use it often. "Hello, Emma. It's nice to meet you." An awkward silence settled over the room. Marcus shifted his weight, unsure what to say. He had come here because Victoria had asked for him, but now that he was standing in front of her, the questions he wanted to ask felt too invasive. What were you doing at that construction site? Why were you alone? What does that tattoo mean? Victoria seemed to sense his hesitation. "I'm guessing you have questions." "A few," Marcus admitted. "But you don't have to answer them. You should be resting." "I've been resting all night." She gestured to the chair beside her bed. "Sit, please. I'd like to talk to you if you have the time." If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. Marcus glanced down at Emma, who nodded encouragingly, then crossed the room and sat in the chair. Emma climbed into his lap, her arms wrapped around his neck, her eyes still fixed on Victoria. "What do you want to know?" Victoria asked. "What were you doing at that construction site?" The question came out more bluntly than Marcus intended, but he could not take it back now. Victoria was quiet for a long moment, her gaze drifting to the window. "I don't remember everything. Pieces are missing, but I remember leaving my office around 10 p.m. I had been working late, I always work late, and I needed to clear my head, so I drove. No destination in mind, just driving, and somehow I ended up near that site." "Why there?" "I don't know." Her voice was tight now, defensive. "I wasn't thinking clearly. I'd been working for 3 days straight, barely eating, barely sleeping. I think I was having some kind of breakdown, and then I was walking through the mud and my legs gave out, and the next thing I remember is waking up here." Marcus watched her carefully. There was more to the story. He could feel it in the spaces between her words, but he did not push. "Not yet. The doctors said you have a medical alert bracelet," he said instead. "That's how they identified you." Victoria glanced down at her wrist, where the silver bracelet gleamed under the fluorescent lights. "I have a heart condition, arrhythmia, usually manageable, but stress makes it worse, and I've been—" She stopped, shook her head. "I've been under a lot of stress lately." "What kind of stress?" "The kind that comes from building a company for 15 years and realizing you've sacrificed everything else in your life to do it." Her voice was bitter, self-mocking. "I don't have friends. I don't have a family. I barely have colleagues I trust. I have a company and a bank account and a reputation, and last night none of that mattered. I was dying in the mud, and there was no one to call. No one would even notice I was gone." The rawness of her admission hung in the air. Marcus did not know what to say to that. He thought about his own life, the long hours, the exhaustion, the constant worry about money. But at least he had Emma. At least he had someone who would notice if he disappeared. "You have people now," Emma said suddenly, her voice small but clear. "You have my dad. He saved you. That means you're connected." Victoria blinked, surprised. Then she looked at Marcus, and for the first time since he had walked into the room, her expression softened. "Connected? I like that." Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a tightness that had nothing to do with fear or guilt, and everything to do with recognition. This woman, this billionaire CEO with her sharp edges and empty life, reminded him of himself 12 years ago, before Emma, before he had learned that survival meant more than just getting through the day. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said. "About your tattoo." Victoria's hand moved instinctively to her shoulder, though it was covered by the hospital gown. "You saw it." "I did, at the construction site. Your blazer was torn. And it has a name, Sophia." Marcus kept his voice steady, even though his pulse was racing. "Who is she?" Victoria's expression shuddered, her walls slamming back into place. "That's personal." "I know, but I need to understand." Marcus leaned forward slightly, his hands clasped between his knees. 12 years ago, I was an EMT. I responded to a car accident, a bad one. There was a woman trapped in the wreckage. I stayed with her while we waited for help, and she told me about a tattoo she had just gotten, a phoenix with flames that spelled a name. Sophia, her sister's name. She died before we could get her out of the car. Victoria stared at him, her face pale. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you have the same tattoo, the exact same design, and I need to know if that's a coincidence or if—" He stopped, not sure how to finish the sentence. "Or if what?" Victoria's voice was sharp now, guarded. "Or if you knew her." The silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Emma shifted in Marcus's lap, her small hand resting on his arm, grounding him. Finally, Victoria spoke. Her name was Natalie Ashford. She was my sister. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. "Your sister." "My older sister." Victoria's voice was flat, emotionless, but Marcus could see the pain beneath it. "She died 12 years ago. Car accident. They said she was driving too fast in the rain, lost control. I was supposed to meet her that night, but I got caught up at the lab. I missed her call. And then—" Her voice cracked. "And then she was gone." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "She got that tattoo a week before she died, to honor our younger sister who died when we were kids. House fire. Sophia was only 6. Victoria's hands were trembling now, her composure crumbling. "Natalie and I survived, but Sophia didn't. And Natalie never forgave herself. She thought she should have been able to save her. So she carried Sophia's name on her skin, and then she died. And I—" She broke off, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. "I got the same tattoo, so I could carry both of them with me." Marcus did not know what to say. The weight of it, the layers of loss and guilt and grief, was almost too much to comprehend. He had spent 12 years haunted by a woman whose name he had never known, only to discover she was part of a story even more tragic than he had imagined. "I was the EMT who stayed with her," Marcus said quietly. "I held her hand. She talked about the tattoo, about Sophia, but she didn't tell me her name. I never knew who she was. I quit 6 months later because I couldn't—" He stopped, shook his head. "I couldn't carry it anymore. All the people I couldn't save." Victoria looked at him, really looked at him, and Marcus saw something in her eyes he had not expected. Understanding, recognition. "You've been carrying my sister for 12 years. "Yes. And now you've saved me." "I guess so." Victoria let out a shaky breath. "That's not a coincidence. That can't be a coincidence." "I don't know what it is," Marcus admitted, "but I couldn't walk away, not after I saw that tattoo. I needed to know." "And now you do." Victoria's voice was softer now, less guarded. "So what happens next?" Marcus did not have an answer to that. He looked down at Emma, who was watching both of them with wide, solemn eyes, and then back at Victoria. "I don't know, but I think—" He hesitated, then pushed forward. "I think maybe we're supposed to help each other figure it out." Victoria studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Maybe we are." They talked for another hour. Victoria told him about Natalie, about how brilliant she had been, how kind, how she had always looked out for Victoria even when Victoria pushed her away. She told him about Sophia, about the fire, about how their parents had never recovered from losing her, how their father had drunk himself to death 5 years later, and their mother had faded into dementia shortly after, how Victoria had thrown herself into her work to avoid feeling anything at all. Marcus told her about his own ghosts, about quitting the EMT job, about Claire leaving, about building a life around Emma because she was the only thing that made sense. He told her about the long hours at the construction site, about the overtime that paid for new shoes and school supplies, about the exhaustion that never quite went away. And Emma, sitting quietly in Marcus's lap, listened to it all. At one point she reached out and took Victoria's hand, her small fingers wrapping around Victoria's larger ones, and said, "You don't have to be sad alone anymore. You have us now." Victoria's eyes filled with tears, and she squeezed Emma's hand gently. "Thank you, sweetheart. That's very kind." When it was finally time to leave, Victoria asked for Marcus's phone number. "I'd like to stay in touch," she said, "if that's okay with you." "Yeah," Marcus said, "that's okay." As they walked out of the hospital, Emma looked up at him and asked, "Dad, is she going to be our friend now?" Marcus thought about it. Friend felt like too small a word for what had just happened, for the strange, impossible connection that had formed in that hospital room. But he did not know what else to call it. "Yeah," he said, "I think she is." Emma smiled, satisfied, and took his hand as they walked toward the car. Marcus did not know what came next. He did not know if this fragile, unexpected bond would last, or if Victoria Ashford would go back to her billion-dollar life and forget about the construction worker who had pulled her from the mud. But for the first time in 12 years, he felt like maybe, just maybe, he had done something that mattered. Not because he had saved a life, though that mattered too, but because he had finally found a way to forgive himself for the one he could not save. The phone call came 3 weeks later at 2:17 a.m. on a Thursday. Marcus jerked awake, his heart already racing before his brain caught up to the sound. He fumbled for his phone on the nightstand, squinting at the bright screen. Victoria's name glowed in the darkness. "Hello?" "Marcus." Her voice was tight, strained. "I'm sorry to call so late. I didn't know who else." She broke off, and he heard something that might have been a sob. Quickly stifled, he was already sitting up, swinging his legs out of bed. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" "I'm at the office. I've been here for 2 days. I can't—" Another pause, longer this time. "I can't seem to leave. Every time I try, I just sit back down and keep working. It's like I've forgotten how to stop." Marcus glanced at Emma's closed bedroom door, then made a decision. "I'm coming to get you." "You don't have to." "Yes, I do. Give me 45 minutes. He ended the call before she could argue, threw on jeans and a jacket, and padded quietly to Emma's room. She was asleep, her stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest, her breathing soft and even. He hated to wake Mrs. Chen at this hour, but he also knew Victoria would not have called unless something was seriously wrong. Mrs. Chen answered on the third knock, her hair in curlers, her robe wrapped tight. "Marcus, what happened?" "Emergency," he said quietly. "Can you watch Emma for a few hours? I'll explain later." Mrs. Chen waved him off. "Go, I'll check on her every 20 minutes. She'll be fine." Marcus drove through the empty streets, the city quiet except for the occasional taxi or delivery truck. Victoria's office was downtown, in one of those glass towers that seemed to scrape the sky. He had looked it up after their first conversation, had seen photographs of the building's sleek lobby and modern design. It was the kind of place where people wore suits that cost more than his truck and spoke in acronyms he did not understand. He felt out of place the moment he walked through the revolving doors. The security guard at the front desk looked up, his expression shifting from boredom to suspicion. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see Victoria Ashford." The guard's eyebrows rose. "It's 2:30 in the morning." "I know. She called me. She's expecting me." The guard studied him for a long moment, taking in his worn jeans, his construction jacket, the exhaustion written across his face. Finally, he picked up a phone, spoke quietly into it, then nodded. 23rd floor, elevators are on your left." Marcus rode the elevator in silence, watching the floor numbers climb. 23 floors up, and he was entering a world he had only ever glimpsed from the outside. The doors opened onto a reception area that looked like something from a magazine. Polished wood floors, abstract art on the walls, furniture that probably cost more than his annual salary. Victoria was standing in the middle of the room, still dressed in the clothes she must have been wearing 2 days ago. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup smudged, and her hands were shaking. "You came," she said, and her voice broke on the words. "Of course I came." Marcus crossed the room, stopped a few feet away from her. "What's going on?" "I don't know." Victoria wrapped her arms around herself, a gesture so vulnerable it made Marcus's chest ache. "I came in on Tuesday for a meeting, and then there was another meeting, and another, and I had an idea I needed to test in the lab, and suddenly it's Thursday morning and I haven't left. I slept on the couch in my office. I had food delivered. I told myself I'd go home after I finished this one thing, but then there was another thing and another. You're spiraling," Marcus said gently. "I know." Tears were streaming down her face now, and she did not bother to wipe them away. "I thought I was getting better. After the hospital, after talking to you, I thought I was changing. I started leaving at 6 p.m. instead of midnight. I stopped sleeping here. I even went to a therapist twice. But then the board meeting came up, and there were investor calls, and I fell back into it, and now I can't get out." Marcus understood. He had seen this before, in himself, in other people who used work to avoid feeling. The way it could swallow you whole if you let it, fill every empty space until there was nothing left but the doing, the motion, the illusion of purpose. "Come on," he said, holding out his hand. "We're leaving." Victoria stared at his hand like it was a lifeline. "I have a presentation tomorrow at 9. I'm not ready." "You're ready enough, and if you're not, the world won't end. Come on." She hesitated, then reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were cold, trembling, but her grip was tight. Marcus led her to the elevator, kept holding her hand as they rode down 23 floors, as they walked through the lobby past the security guard's curious gaze, as they stepped out into the cool pre-dawn air. "Where are we going?" Victoria asked. "Somewhere you can breathe." He took her to the lakefront. It was a 20-minute drive from her office, and by the time they arrived, the sky was starting to lighten, the darkness giving way to deep blue. Marcus parked the truck, and they walked down to the water's edge, where the waves lapped gently against the shore. Victoria stood there, staring out at the lake, her arms wrapped around herself. "I don't remember the last time I watched the sunrise." "Probably been a while," Marcus said. He had brought a blanket from his truck, and he spread it on the sand, gestured for her to sit. After a moment she did, and he sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. They sat in silence as the sun rose, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. The city woke up slowly around them, joggers on the path behind them, a few early morning fishermen setting up their rods, birds calling to each other in the trees. "I'm scared," Victoria said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Of what?" "Of stopping, of slowing down, because if I stop working, if I stop filling every minute with something productive, then I have to think about everything I've lost. Natalie, Sophia, my parents, all the years I wasted building something that doesn't matter when I'm alone at 3 a.m. She turned to look at him, her eyes red-rimmed. "How do you do it? How do you survive the grief?" Marcus thought about it, about the 12 years he had spent carrying Natalie's death, about the way Emma had saved him without even knowing it, about the small, quiet moments that had stitched his life back together one day at a time. "You don't survive it alone," he said. "That's the secret. You find people who see you, who stay, who remind you that you're more than your worst moments, and you let them in, even when it's scary." "I don't know how to do that," Victoria admitted. "I've spent so long keeping people at arm's length. It's easier that way, safer." "It's not safer, it's lonelier, and lonely will kill you just as surely as anything else." Marcus paused, then added, "You called me at 2 a.m. That's letting someone in." Victoria let out a shaky laugh. "I guess it is." They watched the sun climb higher, the light spreading across the water like liquid gold. Marcus thought about all the ways people broke and all the ways they could be put back together. It was never clean, never perfect, but it was possible. He had learned that much. "I want to show you something," Victoria said suddenly. She pulled out her phone, scrolled through it for a moment, then handed it to him. On the screen was a photograph. Two young girls, maybe 7 and 9 years old, standing in front of a house with their arms around each other. The older girl had dark hair and a serious expression. The younger one was grinning, gap-toothed and bright-eyed. "That's me and Natalie," Victoria said. 2 years before Sophia was born. We were so close back then. She used to read me stories every night before bed, made up voices for all the characters." Her voice softened with memory. "After Sophia died, Natalie tried so hard to be both our big sister and our parents. She was only 15, but she stepped up. Made sure I ate, helped me with homework, told me it was okay to cry." Victoria took the phone back, stared at the photo. "And I repaid her by being too busy to answer when she needed me." "You were working. You couldn't have known." "That's what everyone says, but I could have made time. I could have put the work down for one night. I chose not to. And that choice killed her as surely as the rain on that highway." Marcus understood that kind of guilt, the way it could wrap around your lungs and squeeze until you could not breathe. She wouldn't want you to punish yourself like this. She wouldn't want you to waste your life working yourself to death. How do you know? Because she loved you, and people who love you want you to be happy, not just successful. Victoria was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I don't know if I remember how to be happy." "Then learn again. Start small. Sunrise at the lake, coffee with a friend, a conversation that isn't about work." Marcus looked at her. "You could start by meeting Emma properly, not in a hospital room, but somewhere normal. She asks about you, you know, wants to know if you're okay." Victoria's eyes widened. "She asks about me?" "All the time. She thinks we're connected now, that saving your life made us family somehow." "She's not wrong," Victoria said softly. "I feel it too. This connection. Like you and Emma are the only real things in my life." "Then act like it. Show up. Not just when you're falling apart, but on regular days. Let us be part of your life, and let yourself be part of ours." Victoria nodded slowly. "Okay, yes, I'd like that." The crisis came 3 days later, on a Sunday afternoon. Marcus and Emma had invited Victoria to the park, the same park where they spent most of their weekends, with the rusty swing set and the jungle gym that had seen better days. Victoria had shown up in jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, looking more relaxed than Marcus had ever seen her. Emma had grabbed her hand immediately, dragging her toward the swings, and for an hour they had just been 3 people enjoying the sunshine. Then a woman approached, mid-40s, expensively dressed, carrying herself with the kind of confidence that came from money and status. She stopped a few feet away from where Victoria was pushing Emma on the swing, her expression a mix of surprise and judgment. "Victoria Ashford." Victoria turned and Marcus saw her walls slam back into place. "Diane, hello." "I almost didn't recognize you." Diane's gaze swept over Victoria's casual clothes, then shifted to Marcus and Emma. "I didn't know you had a family." "I don't—" Victoria started, then stopped. She glanced at Marcus, at Emma, and something in her expression shifted. "Actually, these are my friends, Marcus and Emma Reed." "Friends?" Diane's tone made it clear what she thought of that. "Well, I hate to interrupt, but I wanted to remind you about the investor dinner tomorrow night. Blackwood Capital is flying in specifically to meet with you. This could be the funding round that takes Ashford Technologies to the next level. You haven't forgotten, have you?" Victoria's face went pale. "No, I remember." "Good. Because frankly, after your performance at the last board meeting, or lack thereof, we need this to go well. The investors are getting nervous about your leadership. They want to see that you're focused, committed, that you haven't lost your edge. Diane's gaze flicked to Emma again, dismissive. I'm sure you understand. I understand perfectly, Victoria said, but her voice was tight. Diane nodded, satisfied. I'll see you tomorrow, 7 p.m. sharp. Don't be late. She walked away, her heels clicking on the pavement. Emma tugged on Victoria's sleeve. I don't like her. Me neither, Victoria murmured. She looked at Marcus, and he could see the conflict written across her face. I forgot about the dinner. I've been so focused on trying to have a life outside work that I let this slip. If I miss it, if I'm not prepared, the board might push me out. Everything I've built could be gone. So you'll prepare, Marcus said calmly. You're brilliant, Victoria. You can handle a dinner with investors. But what if I can't? What if they're right and I've lost my edge? What if trying to be a normal person means I can't be the CEO anymore? Then maybe you were never meant to be that kind of CEO. Marcus stepped closer, his voice gentle but firm. You don't have to choose between having a life and being good at your job. You just have to find a balance. And if the investors can't see that, if they think you're only valuable when you're killing yourself, then maybe they're not the right investors. It's not that simple. Yes, it is. Marcus took her hand, the way she had taken his at the lakefront. You're terrified that if you're not perfect, if you're not sacrificing everything, then you're not enough. But that's not true. You're enough exactly as you are, human, flawed, trying to figure it out. He squeezed her hand. And if your company can't survive you being a person, then it's not worth keeping. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. What if I lose everything? Then you'll still have us, and that's not nothing. Emma wrapped her arms around Victoria's waist, hugging her tight. You'll always have us. We're connected, remember. Victoria let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and pulled Emma close. You're right, we're connected. She looked up at Marcus. Okay, I'll go to dinner, I'll be prepared, and I'll be professional. But I'm not going to apologize for having a life. If they don't like it, that's their problem. That's my girl, Marcus said, and the words felt right, natural, like she was already part of their small, broken, beautiful family. Victoria went to dinner. She gave a presentation that, by all accounts, was brilliant and confident. She answered the investors' questions with precision and passion, and she did not apologize once for taking time to rest, to breathe, to be human. The investors loved her. The funding came through, and Victoria celebrated by taking Emma and Marcus to dinner at a diner that served pancakes all day. It was not a fairy tale. There were still hard days, still moments when Victoria slipped back into old patterns, still times when Marcus had to call her at midnight and remind her to go home. But slowly, steadily, things changed. Victoria hired an assistant whose primary job was to enforce boundaries. She set office hours and stuck to them most days. She joined Emma and Marcus for weekend park trips, learned to braid Emma's hair from YouTube videos, and showed up to Emma's school play in the third row, clapping louder than anyone. And Marcus learned to accept help. When his truck broke down, Victoria arranged for it to be fixed without making him feel like charity. When Emma needed tutoring in math, Victoria hired someone and presented it as a favor, like Marcus was doing her a kindness by accepting. Slowly, the lines between their worlds blurred, and the distance between construction worker and billionaire CEO became irrelevant. 6 months after that night at the construction site, Victoria showed up at Marcus's apartment with a proposal. I've been thinking, she said, sitting at his kitchen table while Emma colored at the counter. About Natalie, about Sophia. about how they're gone, but their story isn't finished. What do you mean? I want to start a foundation in their names to help families who've lost children or children who've lost parents, grief counseling, financial support, just something that makes their deaths mean something. She looked at him. But I can't do it alone. I need someone who understands loss, someone who knows what it's like to carry people you couldn't save. I need you. Marcus stared at her. Me? You, as co-director. We'd build it together, use my resources and your heart, help people the way we're helping each other. Marcus thought about it, about Natalie dying on that highway, about Sophia lost in a fire, about all the people he had tried to save and couldn't, and all the people he maybe still could. Okay, he said. Yes, let's do it. Emma looked up from her coloring, beaming. See, I told you, we're connected, we're family. Victoria smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. Yeah, sweetheart, we are? The foundation launched a year later, the Sophia and Natalie Ashford Foundation. It helped hundreds of families in its first year alone, and it grew from there. Marcus cut back his hours at the construction site, working part-time while he built the foundation with Victoria. Emma grew older, thrived in school, and spent her afternoons at the foundation's office, doing homework while Marcus and Victoria changed lives. And late at night, when Marcus lay in bed and thought about that rainy Tuesday, when he had found a stranger in the mud, he felt something he had not felt in years. Peace, not because everything was perfect, not because the grief was gone or the past was erased, but because he had finally learned that redemption was not about erasing your failures. It was about showing up anyway, trying again, letting people in, even when it was terrifying. Victoria had learned it too. She still worked hard, still cared about her company, but she also laughed more, cried more, showed up more. She became the person Natalie would have wanted her to be, not perfect, but present, not invincible, but human. And Emma? Emma had two adults who loved her fiercely, who showed her every day that family was not about blood or money or status. It was about showing up, about staying, about being connected in the ways that mattered. On the anniversary of the night Marcus had found Victoria, they went back to the lakefront, all three of them, sitting on a blanket as the sun rose, watching the light spread across the water. Thank you, Victoria said quietly, for saving me, for not giving up on me. Thank you for calling, Marcus replied, for letting me in. Emma leaned against Victoria's shoulder, her voice drowsy. We're the best family ever. And watching the sunrise paint the sky in gold and pink, Marcus thought she might be right. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.